Today, let's talk about the CR-56 Amax. The CR-56 Amax was one of the first high-skill weapons. It had quite a lot of recoil compared to other weapons, but it also had a lot of damage, so once you mastered the recoil, you did extremely well with it. If some of you guys have been around for a while, you may remember that in most of my videos I always used either the CR-56 or the Holger as my primary weapon. The Holger when I was just trying to have fun, but the CR-56 when I actually wanted to win. And actually, the CR-56 was one of the 5 weapons that was in my original stat guide. It felt great when I was using it, and I wanted to know if it was better than the Grau. And I'm really glad that I decided to make the guide because I found that the CR-56 was way better than the Grau in terms of TTK. And the way that I was using it, this was perfect. So in this build, we're using the monolithic suppressor, the XRK Zodiac S440 barrel, the TAC laser, the OK 3.0 times optic, and the 45 round mags. If you want to run the meta version of the CR-56, you can swap out the TAC laser for the Commando foregrip. By doing this, you get 20 to 30 meters more of range, but your movement gets destroyed and you get a much worse ADS time. So you gotta ask yourself if it's worth the trade-off. But let's get into the stats, starting with mobility. It has an ADS time of 310 milliseconds, which is quite slow compared to the harder hitting Cold War weapons. Its reload and reload add times are 3 seconds from empty and 2.5 if you're saving 1 bullet in the mag. And its mag cap is 45, but it fires a bit slower, so this is okay. Its movement and sprint speeds aren't that great, but they're decent for a Modern Warfare weapon. And its ADS strafe speed is 1.82 meters per second, which is expected for a long-range weapon. Its sprint out and tag sprint out times are at an average 270 and 390 milliseconds, but its stability is 1.5T, which is really great. Its bullet velocity is only 1000 meters per second, which isn't that great for a long-range weapon, but it does work. And its rate of fire is 10.5 rounds per second, or 630 rounds per minute. So it gets a mobility score of 31. Its recoil isn't the greatest, but it can still be used to 100 meters. After that, you're gonna have to start tap firing or burst firing. So it gets a recoil score of 40. For its damage, it has 1 drop off at 35 meters. In the first damage range, it has a really competitive headshot TTK, but below average upper torso, lower torso, and limb TTKs. However, if you mix in 1 headshot, you can get an extremely competitive TTK of 571 milliseconds. In the second damage range, it gets average TTKs, and you need more than 1 headshot to reduce your shots to kill. But this isn't a bad thing. This means you can hit anywhere and get an average TTK. So it gets a damage score of 55. And when we add up all the categories, it gets a final score of 126. 126 is a lot lower than the 145 that I had when I first made the stat guide. I understand that they wanted to make the CR-56 a little bit less dominant, but when they took away its upper torso multiplier, it just kinda stopped being that good anymore. I wish they would have just made it less forgiving, so having worse lower torso and limb TTKs in both ranges compared to its upper torso and headshot TTKs. That way it would have been a lot harder for someone who doesn't know how to control the gun to get those great TTKs. Because right now, even though it has average TTKs, you're not going to get those past 100 meters. When a weapon like the EM2 exists that has better recoil, better TTKs, and better mobility, there's not much reason to use the CR-56. And I hate to say it, but after I got the last nerf, I just kinda stopped using it. Weapons that fit in the between long range and super long range category weren't that common. It was nice having a weapon that was pretty good up close if you had the skill to hit all your shots, and still good at range, but it would never be able to stretch out as something like the Kilo or the Grau. And against SMGs up close, it still had a place, because it could potentially beat someone, but you had to hit all your shots. But someone with an MP5 could just slide in and hip fire and get you because it was way more forgiving. And right now, there's nothing really in the meta that can fit that role that the CR-56 once had. Some weapons like the MG82 do have the TTK to fill this role, but it does not have the mobility. Don't get me wrong, the CR-56's mobility was never that great, but it wasn't that bad either. So in Verdansk, I can't really recommend the CR-56 anymore. If you play a lot of Rebirth, then it may have a spot, and if you do manage to get a headshot up close, it is still pretty decent. You'll be losing gunfights to the OTS and other SMGs, but if you're fighting someone with a sniper support weapon, you do stand a chance. One of my 10 loadout slots is a CR-56 Ghost loadout, so I still keep it around and sometimes I do bring it out. But this is the loadout that I change whenever I need to make a video, since I know I'm probably not going to be using it. It just sadly can't compete in the current meta. Maybe if they improved its mobility, especially its ADS time, it would have a place again, but right now, it just really doesn't. So while I can't recommend it to newer players or players who really want to do good, if you want to use a CR-56 for nostalgia's sake, then go ahead. It is still a decent weapon. So that's the CR-56. Have you used it recently? And if so, what'd you think about it? Are you sad about all the nerfs it got, or are you one of the people that are glad that it got nerfed this hard? And if there's any weapon build or part of the game you want to break down, let me know and you may see it on the next Community Wednesday. But that's the video. If you enjoyed it or it's helped you in any way, let me know by leaving a like. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section down below. And if you want to make sure that you never miss another video, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.